My son called me a burden on Christmas. Even that was the moment I realized he was planning to erase me from my own life. I never imagined that on Christmas Eve, my own son would look me in the eyes and treat me like I was nothing more than a problem that needed to be removed. Before we begin, a huge thank you to all of you. We've officially reached 100 subscribers. It may seem like a small milestone, but for us, it means everything. Now, we're aiming for our next goal, 1,000 subscribers. So please take a second to hit the like button. Subscribe so you never miss a story. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from and how you're doing today. Your support truly keeps this channel alive. Now, let me tell you my story. My name is Eleanor, and I am 69 years old. I've lived a full life. I raised my children with love, stood beside my husband through every hardship, and helped build everything we had from nothing. This house or home in Greenwich, Connecticut, was never just a building to me. It held our memories, our sacrifices, and our dreams, sealed into every wall and floorboard. That Christmas Eve, soft snow fell outside while I stood alone in the kitchen, basting a turkey. The smell of rosemary and butter filled the air, and for a brief moment, I felt safe. The holidays always reminded me of when my husband was still alive, standing at the head of the table, smiling proudly at our children. Since he passed away 6 years ago, the house had grown quieter, but I never complained. I kept it warm, clean, and welcoming, especially on Christmas. I wanted my children to feel like they were coming home, not just visiting an old house. My son arrived first. He's in his 40s, no successful on the surface, always rushed. He gave me a quick hug, more like a task than affection. Then immediately checked his phone. His wife followed behind him, already complaining about the smell of the food and the stuffy air inside the house. My daughter arrived shortly after. She looked beautiful, but barely looked at me. Her attention stayed glued to her phone, as if I no longer existed in her world. When we finally sat down to dinner, I tried to keep the mood warm. I shared memories, spoke about their father, and laughed softly at moments that once brought us joy. But they talked over me about money, bills, and stress, never once asking how I was. Then my son suddenly set his glass down hard on the table. "Mom," he said, "we need to talk about what's going to happen next." A cold chill ran through my body. I didn't realize it yet, but in that moment, my children had already decided my future. Without asking me, and without caring how much it would break me, what my son said next would change my life. Forever and it all started with one cruel word. My son's words hung in the air like something sharp and poisonous. He leaned back in his chair, folded his hands like a businessman closing a deal, and looked straight at me, not as his mother, but as a problem. "Mom," he said calmly, "this house is too much for you now. You're getting older, and honestly, you're becoming a burden." That word hit me harder than any shout ever could. A burden? I felt my hands start to shake. I had carried him inside me for 9 months. I had stayed up nights when he was sick, worked alongside his father to keep this family standing. And somehow, I was now a burden. I tried to laugh it off. "What are you talking about? I'm doing just fine. I take care of this house. I'm healthy." My daughter let out a short, bitter laugh. "Mom, do you even know how much it costs to keep this place running? The property taxes alone are insane. You're sitting in a museum while we're drowning out there." I reminded them about the trust their father left behind. How I managed everything carefully. How our lawyer had guided me. But my son cut me off. "That lawyer is outdated," he snapped. "We had the estate reviewed. You're draining resources. Mom, this house should be working for the family, not trapping money so you can live alone in it." His wife finally spoke, her voice cold and measured. "You've lived here rent-free for years. Utilities, staff, food, do you know how much that costs? You're eating into our inheritance." My chest tightened. Inheritance. I looked at each of them, waiting for anyone to show even a little shame. But their faces were firm. Decided, this wasn't a conversation. It was a verdict. I am not a burden, I said quietly. I helped build this life. I am your mother. My daughter reached into her purse and slid a glossy brochure across the table. We already made arrangements. It's time you move somewhere more appropriate. I stared down at the page. Smiling elderly faces, beige walls. A nursing home. You want to put me in a home? I whispered. On Christmas? It's for your own good, my son said. They have staff, doctors, everything. You'll be safer. And we've already found a buyer for the house. My daughter added casually, 12 million cash. My ears rang. I couldn't hear the fire crackling anymore. I couldn't smell the food I had cooked all day. I'm not leaving, I said. This is my home. My son's expression hardened. You don't really have a choice. That's when my daughter placed a stack of legal papers on the table. We have temporary control over your affairs now, she said softly. The court agreed you're no longer capable. In that moment, something inside me broke. And something else, something much stronger, woke up. They thought the papers meant they had won, but they had no idea what I was already holding on to. I don't remember finishing my dinner. I remember sitting there, staring at those legal papers, trying to understand how my own children had turned my life into a courtroom case. They spoke about incidents and concerns, twisting small mistakes into proof that I was no longer capable of living on my own. I wanted to scream. I wanted to flip the table. Instead, I went quiet. Within an hour, everything I owned was reduced to a single suitcase waiting by the front door. A hired driver arrived, not a family car, not kindness, just a transaction. My son didn't meet my eyes as I put on my coat. My daughter avoided looking at me altogether. His wife checked her watch. As I stepped outside, the cold cut through me. Snow crunched under my shoes as I got into the back of that car. Through the window, I watched the house grow smaller, the home I had protected for decades. I felt something then that I had never felt before. Abandoned. The nursing home was quiet in a way that felt wrong. The walls were beige. The air smelled like disinfectant and loneliness. A nurse led me to a small room with one narrow bed and a window that faced a parking lot. This will be your room, Mrs. Whitmore, she said gently. I nodded, too tired to argue. The first few days, I barely spoke. I didn't eat much. I didn't join group activities or watch the loud television in the common room. I just sat on the bed, replaying Christmas Eve over and over in my mind. How did my children become strangers? At night, when the halls went quiet, I reached into my handbag and pulled out something I had managed to keep hidden, a small black notebook. My husband had given it to me years ago and told me, if anything ever goes wrong, this will protect you. At the time, I thought he was being dramatic. Now, I understood. Inside were records, notes, account numbers, instructions written in his careful handwriting. It wasn't just a notebook, it was proof. Proof of how the trust was really structured. Proof of safeguards my children didn't know existed. As I read, my grief slowly turned into clarity. They thought I was powerless. They thought putting me in this place meant the end. But they were wrong, very wrong. On the fifth night, I used the hallway phone and called the only person I trusted completely, my late husband's attorney. When he answered, I could hear the relief in his voice. Eleanor, he said, I've been trying to find you. They put me in a home, I replied calmly. But I have the notebook. There was a long silence. Then he said quietly, if you have that, we can stop everything. I hung up the phone and sat back on the bed, my heart racing, not with fear, but with purpose. They gave me time. They gave me silence. They gave me space to think. And without realizing it, they gave me the chance to take my life back. What my children didn't know was that the next 16 days would completely destroy the future they thought they had secured. The days inside that nursing home moved slowly, but my mind did not. Every morning, I played the role they expected from me, the quiet, confused old woman. I spoke softly to the nurses, nodded when they explained routines, and let them believe the stress had finally broken me. Inside, though, I was counting days and building a plan. My children thought they had one. That belief made them careless. Each night, I spoke with my husband's attorney on the phone in the hallway. He explained everything carefully, step by step. My husband had anticipated this. He had known that money changes people have in family. The house was protected by a clause my children never read. If it was sold without my willing consent, the money wouldn't go to them. It would be frozen and redirected. On top of that, the power they claimed to have over me was based on exaggerations and lies. Lies that could be undone. 10 days after Christmas, my son and daughter came to visit. They brought cheap flowers and nervous smiles, like people checking on a task rather than a mother. My son asked if I was adjusting well. My daughter said the place seemed nice enough. I told them I was tired, confused, grateful they were handling things. That's when my son pulled out a paper. "We just need one last signature," he said gently. "It's nothing important, just paperwork for the house sale." I looked at the page, my hands shaking on purpose. It was the final form they needed to finish the deal. Without it, nothing could move forward. I hesitated. I let silence stretch. Then I signed. The relief on their faces told me everything I needed to know. They left quickly after that, already celebrating a future they believed was guaranteed. I watched them from my window as they drove away, laughing. They never looked back. As soon as the door closed, the fear left my body. I stood up straighter. My hands stopped shaking. That signature didn't give them power. It gave me proof. The following days were the hardest emotionally. I watched other residents sit alone, forgotten by families who had moved on. It strengthened my resolve. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore, I was fighting for dignity. On the 20th day, my attorney called. "The sale is finalized," he said, "but not the way they think." The house now legally belonged to a company they had never questioned, a company I controlled. "They're throwing a party," he added, celebrating their new beginning. I closed my eyes and smiled for the first time in weeks. The next morning, I checked out of the nursing home. The staff looked surprised to see me dressed neatly, standing tall. "I'm going home," I said. A black car was waiting outside. As we drove back toward my house, I felt calm, steady, ready. They had given me 21 days to disappear. Instead, I was coming back. They thought the party would celebrate their victory, but they had no idea who the real owner of that house was. That evening, my house was filled with people who believed they were celebrating a victory. Expensive cars lined the driveway. Music echoed through rooms that once held my family's quiet laughter. My son stood proudly near the staircase, raising his glass, talking about new beginnings and moving forward. My daughter smiled beside him, already dressed like someone who thought she had won. They had no idea I was already home. When I stepped into the room, the music faded. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Every eye turned toward me. My son's face drained of color. "Mom," he stammered, "you're not supposed to be here." I walked forward calmly, my heart steady. "This is my home," I said, "and I never left it." Their lawyer began flipping through papers, confused and panicked. That's when my attorney stepped beside me and placed the documents on the table. "The sale is complete," he said, "but the buyer is not who you think." My son shook his head. "That's impossible." I looked him in the eye. "I am the buyer." Silence fell like a heavy curtain. The trust clause my husband created was clear. The money from the sale never belonged to my children. It was redirected exactly as he intended. Their accounts were frozen. The authority they claimed over me was officially revoked hours earlier. They stood there stunned, exposed, powerless. "You called me a burden," I said softly, You tried to erase me from my own life. But everything you tried to take from me led me right back here. I asked the guests to leave. One by one, they did, avoiding eye contact, whispers filling the hallway. When the house was finally quiet, only my children remained. I'm not here for revenge, I told them. I'm here for dignity. They had 1 hour to pack and go. When the door closed behind them, the silence felt different this time, peaceful. I walked into the kitchen, touched the counter where I had stood on Christmas Eve, and took a deep breath. The house still held my memories, but now, it also held my strength. I had lost my children that night, but I found myself, and I was never a burden. I was the foundation. If this story touched your heart, tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story so more people remember. No matter how old you are, it's never too late to stand up for yourself.